So at this time, we're going to go ahead and number one on the agenda for tonight is approval of the agenda. I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the agenda, raise your right hand. All opposed? Okay, the agenda is approved. And for the record also, we have Commissioner Amsler, Commissioner Klecka, Commissioner Beckendorf, and then Commissioner Beckendorf contacted my office this evening to let me know he was not going to be able to make it tonight. Barnett, I'm sorry. What did I say? Beckendorf. Okay, Commissioner Beckendorf is right here. Commissioner Barnett contacted my office. Okay, the agenda's been approved. Number two, we now have a presentation by David Crossley, Senior Fellow of Houston Tomorrow, Dr. John Jacob, Professor and Extension Specialist, Texas A&M University System, and Jeff Table.
He's not here tonight.
He's not here.
So Charles Wimple.
Charles Wimple, okay, with HGAC, are here to give presentations and talk about considerations and opportunities for future development of Waller County. Gentlemen, it's all yours.
Would that Mr. Gage give you another little further introduction?
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, Judge and Commissioners. Thank you so much for the opportunity to bring this program to you. First, I'd like to, as organizer of it, I guess, I'd like to thank, recognize and thank, yeah, here we go. I'm not used to this. Recognize and thank you guys, the theater, for making the facility available to us. It is a movie theater. If anybody gets hungry, help yourself right out there. I don't think it'll bother anybody. I'd like to recognize Billy Frazier for video, Francis Rudson for the PA system, and Kelvin Kirby for bringing the lights this evening, and in particular to the speakers. These are extremely interesting guys, and I hope that what they have finally put together for you will be extremely interesting. All the public officials of the cities and city councils, mayors, candidates that there may be for any of those slots. At the end of this program, I will ask each of those groups of folks to rise where they may be in case there's one of their constituents might like to talk to them afterwards. Pattison replied to my invitation that tonight's their regular meeting, so probably no one from there will be here. Now, purpose of our presentation. Where does this program come from? Well, long-range planning has been mentioned frequently around the Commissioner's Court in the last several years. Why? Partly because of infrastructure needs, partly because, as we all know, Houston is coming, whether we like it or not, whether we're ready or not, and it's coming fast. If Waller County's citizens are going to have much input into our county's future, we had all better first get educated and then start making some decisions. I found this next quotation here in the Austin County Vision and Strategic Plan. It really jumped out at me. We're going to have growth, whether we like it or not. So why not have growth we like? What kind of growth would that be? Different areas of the county might come to different conclusions. But before making any decisions, we must first think about the considerations that would go into decisions, the factors. We need to then think about the opportunities that might arise from each type of decision that we would make about that choice. This program is intended to open discussions about those considerations and opportunities. This program is not intended to offer specific recommendations because one size isn't going to fit all, probably. It is tonight the beginning of educating us all, both the elected officials and we citizens of Waller County, about those considerations and opportunities that we may never have been aware of before. One possible choice, in all fairness, one possible choice is always to do nothing. However, if we make that choice, future generations may say we were delinquent if we make that choice because of either ignorance about other possibilities or because it's the easy thing to do, the course of least resistance. So what to do? Tonight, we start getting educated. Okay, who are these guys that are going to be the speakers? Thinking that folks in Waller County need information, and I include myself, preferably unbiased information, knowledgeable people were sought out, people with no apparent irons in the fire relative to the county. Providence and an intestinal bug have led to the gentleman that I'm about to introduce. They're used to full-day presentations, 2-day presentations. So they have probably had a great challenge to boil things down to 90 minutes or less. And I most sincerely thank them for working up whatever exactly it is that they're going to say. So it is my privilege to introduce to you in alphabetical order, David Crossley, Senior Fellow with Houston Tomorrow, formerly known as the Gulf Coast Institute. It's a 501c3 charitable nonprofit foundation founded in 1998 to explore urban issues and to inform the discussion of growth in the Houston region. Next, Dr. John Jacob, and on the right, please, yes, professor and extension specialist. He's, just say he's with A&M, and he works with AgriLife Extension. That's all needs saying? John, okay. And the third speaker, the one who is under the weather tonight, was Jeff Table. He's with Houston Galveston Area Council. He sent one of his bosses, Chuck Wimple. And I don't know exactly what your title is, Chuck. Sorry. Oh, it's fixed. Okay, Chief Operations Officer. So now, David, Jeff, Chuck, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. This is really exciting for us. I mean, this is the kind of stuff we love to do, get in sort of on the ground floor and talk about these very, very complicated things. So I think this could be fun tonight. I hope it'll be interesting, and maybe there'll be some surprises, and then who knows what we'll all think at the end of the thing. So choices for growth, that's the whole game. So there's always choices, and there's choices for the way people want to live, all of that stuff. There's a lot of millions of decisions to be made. I got this from your Waller County Economic Development Partnership, this map, and I thought it was really great that the towns and the cities are represented as stars, because in the end you'll see that's what we're going to talk about mostly, because that's the places where you want things to happen that are going to be good things and are going to help you retain the open space that people like here and so forth. I'm a little curious why Pine Island is not on this map, but and maybe somebody will tell me later on. But. So we want to start by looking at the sort of the physical environment you have here. What exactly is Waller? What's it sitting on? What is all that about? So John Jacob will start with that.
Okay. Let's see. That here. I guess we just do it right here, right? Okay. Well, it's a real pleasure for me to be here. I am a physical scientist, an earth scientist, so I'm going to talk about things like soils and wetlands and prairies and forests and those kind of things that are kind of the basis of what actually drives our economy, and some of which we may actually want to save for the future. At least I would hope you would want to do. Move what? Oh, I just kind of. Oh, okay. All right, do one of those. Okay, very good. Okay, so here we got a nice little hydrologic map of the county. One of the things that you all are probably aware of that certainly stands out as us is you really are on a major drainage divide. Not quite the continental divide, but half of your county goes over to the Brazos River, and the other half then flows back over to Galveston Bay. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when I talk about some of the natural resources in the area. One other thing to point out as we think about growth that's coming, do you see all these red lines on here? It's very significant red lines. Those red lines are for streams that have been impacted by urban runoff, right? So they've got enough stuff, enough crud that flows into them that they are no longer suitable for swimming, fishing, much less drinking, of course. So you can, we're not predicting anything here, but one might assume as pavement comes this way that, and we were to classify this in another 20, 30 years, that some of these might turn red there. All right, so we've got some great natural resources in your county. I hope you know that. I'm going to certainly reiterate some of these things. We've got some wonderful prairies out here. Again, this is my area of expertise. I'm a watershed doctor, right? Right? So you all know what a watershed is, right? That's a piece of land where all the water drains out to one point in the landscape, right? So I like to think about, in fact, watersheds in terms of health. So I am a doctor in trying to fix up watersheds and look at the health. And so just like a doctor might pull up an x-ray or something like that, I can do the same. I can look at the drainage ways. I can think about those red lines, how much stuff is going into the water, and how healthy that circulatory system might be. What kind of wetlands, what kind of forests are out here. But that's not all that I look at as the watershed doctor. People live in watersheds too. So we don't have the idea that the only healthy watersheds are where no people are, because people are going to live in watersheds. And this is a lot about the kinds of choices that we have to make. Well, there we go. Okay. Thought that might have been the gong here pulling me off. That does happen from time to time. So again, there we go. Okay. So it's about the cities. It's about the towns as well. Okay, in terms of watershed health. And one of the take-home messages that I want to leave with you is that the quality of place, right, that we create in terms of where we live, in terms of human habitat, has everything to do with the quality of the natural places that surround us, the prairies, the forests, all those things. These two kinds of places are joined at the hip. So if we want to have the prairies, the forests, those kinds of things for the future, we need to build cities that are good habitat for people. Okay? So this is something about the choices that we've got to make here in the future. So a few years ago, we came together under the auspices, in fact, of HGAC to think about the natural resources left in our area. You know, you guys, of course, are on the front wave of growth coming from Houston, but this is going on all the way around Houston. We live in a very flat region. A lot of people think, well, there's just nothing interesting here, right? If you think about going to see interesting areas, you think, well, I'm going to the Rocky Mountains or Big Bend or something like that. We don't tend to think of anything interesting here. But I want to make sure that you understand that there are very interesting places here of world-class quality in terms of the wetlands, in terms of the prairies, the savannas, etc. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was, I'm not quite clear anymore, we came together and we said, you know what, we need to map out what we have. We need to sort of delineate that out, because as we make these choices, we know we're going to have to give up some stuff, no question about it. But are there areas that are particularly interesting, that are worthwhile, that maybe we should save for the future? Maybe they have some function in terms of water quality, in terms of flora and fauna. Maybe that's something that we should take care of. And actually, it is on our watch where these choices are going to be made. We have 4 million people coming. Isn't that about right, Chuck? 3.95, whatever. Okay, and if they come at the same density that we're building now, that will be about 1,000 square miles that's gone. And it just so turns out that a lot of the great stuff that's left is in the urban periphery. You know, if you go farther out, you go down here in Wharton and Matagorda County, most of that was land leveled for rice. We actually have a lot of unland leveled native prairies in this area that we don't see farther out. So it's in this next time period when we are looking at losing a lot of what we have. So we came together, we said, let's make a map. And I'm not going to go through all the great details here, but we've got forests, upland forests, bottomland forests, coastal prairie of high integrity, moderate integrity. I'll explain that a little bit. We've got wetlands, estuarine wetlands down here. We also have prime farmland. You know, this means basically good dirt is what folks around here might call it, right? Okay, precious stuff that we are losing at an incredible rate. We might want to think about that for the future as well. So I'm just going to show a little bit of these areas, but you can see that there is actually some pretty interesting stuff. We've got, of course, the forests up here to the north. Then we've got quite a bit of prairie and forest down in the rest of the area. Now, one of the areas, to me, that's the crown jewel of our whole area is this Brazos corridor right here. Particularly down here to our, just to our south, is one of the areas of richest diversity because there are bottomland forests, there are upland forests, there are very large tracts of prairie. This is the Nash Ranch down here. This is about 30 to 40,000 acres of unland-leveled prairie. Never been land-leveled. Okay, special stuff. And then if we extend that to the north, we've called this the Brazos-Columbia corridor. It really is a unique region in the area, all the way from down to the mouth of the Brazos, all the way up here to the, in our region, the headwaters. And you can see that Waller County actually has a fair amount of diversity and interesting areas that is connected all the way down to the mouth of the river. So as we look ahead into the future in terms of the kinds of areas that we want to be preserving, this is indeed a very special area for sure. So here's an up-close map of Waller County itself. The light green areas are the coastal prairies. I'll show you some maps of that. Of course, in the southern part, this is, you actually have a major divide. I can't quite remember where, but I guess right in here, you know, between the very flat land and then the very large nosebleed heights, right, of your northern Waller County, you know, very lofty peaks up here of, I think it might get as high as about maybe 80 feet, maybe 90 feet, something like that at the most, right? But nonetheless, great stuff all the way up and down. Prairies all the way up in here. Of course, you're part of the what we call the Katy Prairie. So definitely a great endowment of special places, but special places that are under threat. This is, I don't think this is from Katy Prairie here, but you know, these are the kinds of areas, the prairies, you know. You've been out in the Laetris there in the springtime. It's a beautiful area. You've got bottomland hardwoods here along both the Brazos River and some of the creeks, areas that certainly have been logged over. There's nothing really pristine here, but there are areas that still have a lot of the original functions that have been here since the get-go. This is what these prairies actually look like on the ground. This is a color infrared photo. It's not here from Waller County, but it's what we call prairie pothole country. Have you all heard that word, prairie pothole? That's what folks, the old guys used to call them, right? So these are roads here, oil and gas roads. These darker areas are actual potholes that might be wet, saturated half the year, maybe even sometimes 3/4 of the year. So great habitat for all kinds of waterfowl. And then these little mounds here, see all these little dots? We call those pimple mounds, or some people will call them mima mounds, just little places that rise up maybe 1 or 2 feet above the landscape. So if you see a landscape like this, and there's plenty of them here in Waller County, it has never ever been plowed. It has never ever been land leveled. So if you think about that, and how much land leveling has gone on and how much we've lost of that original prairie, this is great stuff. And so we were able to map this out on aerial photographs. You can see how easy it is to see that. It's not that hard to map these areas out. Areas of singular diversity, because in very short range, you know, it's not like there's big mountains here, but you go from some areas that are, like I said, wet all the time, and then up to these little pimple mounds that might actually be semi-arid. They might actually be fairly dry, a whole different kind of vegetation. So it's an incredible template of diversity for flora and fauna, what I would call world class. Now it takes, you know, a certain knowing look at it, right? When you drive by at 50 miles an hour, you don't see much. But once you know the prairie and you look out and you see it, then you might look out on something like this. Maybe this is a prairie pothole, say in late February, before grass is really getting growing and has pumped the water out. And you see these large inundated areas, and then of course you see the little pimple mounds. And you can see they kind of travel in gangs, right? There's a whole bunch of them going right along there, and then there's a nice gallery for us in the background. So special landscapes, takes a special eye to recognize them, right? It's not like, Mount Yosemite you see sticking out of the ground. You have to kind of know what you're looking for. But once you've been here. And a special area here in Waller County that we don't see in other areas, and we really didn't map it out other than to say they were woodlands, but that's the post oak savanna. So, and there's a lot of great post oak savanna. And I have to admit right here, let's see, so right up in here, these kind of little, so the darker areas, let's see, upland forest, these darker areas, a lot of these are actual post oak savanna. I just have to say right here, the post oak is my favorite tree of all the trees in the world, and especially in the wintertime. You know, it just has all those right angles on it, right, that no other trees seem to have. So it's just a kind of a very special beauty, even when it doesn't have leaves on the ground. The other part, this is not the best slide, but all of these dark areas here are prime farmland. Now that doesn't mean there's not pretty good dirt out here, but it means this is really good dirt. This is great stuff. And of course, with growth moving towards the west side, that's what we're losing the most of. So you could say that we are messing in our nests. And our grandchildren, was that Bob? Somebody was talking about the future, right? They might kind of wonder, why did you lose that stuff? You know, we need that. You know, we need that for our time. There are a lot of big pieces of prairie. I'm going to fly over some of this. We do want to alert you to a program that's going on that I'm collaborating with and many others. HGAC, of course, is involved in this, but Houston Wilderness, I think, is kind of the lead organization, called a plan called the Regional Conservation Plan, where we've taken this map, this ecologic map, again, that was produced by HGAC and my group as well, and now starting to look at, you know, what areas can we save here. We've tried to make this map a little more synthetic, you know, rather than having all these buku pictures here. We've got basically the northern forest, the Columbia Corridor, as we're calling it, the Galveston Bay margin system, all from some pretty special areas. But again, as I say, I think very few areas as rich as this Columbia Corridor. So we have a lot of folks come together. We've got the Restore Act monies that are coming as part of the Discovery, the big, what was it called? Discovery Horizon, the big well that blew up in the Gulf Coast a few years ago. Deepwater Horizon, that's right. Okay, so Deepwater, a lot of money is going to be coming from that, and a lot of people would like to see that money go into conservation, and some of that, you know, certainly could find its way a little bit up, a little bit farther up. So we're working, again, as I said, to identify areas that need to be saved and to find ways to save those areas, either through fee simple acquisition, through conservation, through you know, conservation easements, whatever ways we can find to get these parcels out of harm's way and to have that legacy there for our children. I want my grandchildren to be able to know what a prairie pothole is, what a pimple mound is, let alone all the other services that are there, as well as the prime farmland. But that's only one way to handle this. You know, we can do what we can to save this, but we have this other little row crop coming up here, right? And so, you know, how do you deal with that? So that's the other part, and that's, I think, what's going to take up a lot of our time here. And it has to do, again, with choices. That's sort of our mantra here today, is choices. So this is a photograph from 1944. This is on the Katy Prairie. This is not far from here. It's not all in Waller County. But this is what stuff looked like back in the 40s. Chock-a-block full of wetlands. This is Highway 290, right? All of these dark guys are wetlands. You know, it's 30, 40, 50% wetlands out there. There were a lot of ducks. There were a lot of geese. There was a lot of stuff out there. You can see the little pimple mounds out there. It's an incredible landscape. Now, had we been back then looking to the future, we might have said, well, you know, we can't save it all. You know, we're going to grow. We're going to be Houston, right? We could have said, yeah, we're gonna have to take some of that. But we might have said, maybe we should save certain tracts, right? We didn't do that. We just kind of developed willy-nilly. Don't worry about it, okay? So what happened then is, just as you might expect, this is 1944. This is now. So gone to hell in a handbasket, right? A few little things. This is the old Sweeney Ranch here. Still a little bit. This is actually the last great piece on one of the last great pieces on the Katy Prairie, not the only one. But it's going very quick. This is Barker Cypress Road coming right down here. Now, So just as we see this here, the choices, well, what are our choices now? Are there still things left? Yes, there are still things. Here's another photo from the 1940s. Again, I couldn't find much 1940s photo in Waller County, so I had to kind of be on your edge a little bit. But this, I think a piece of this is in, that's the county line right there. Harris County here, Waller County over there. You got the same kind of stuff. Here's 1944. There's some potholes out there. Well, guess what? This is today. We've still got a lot of potholes up here. You know, vegetation might have been pounced on a little bit, but it's got the bones. It's got what it needs to be restored. It could actually be very much like what the first settlers in this area saw when they came here, and that could be the legacy that we have. So we need to think now. Then it's not just about the conservation, it's about those choices that we make, the kind of development that is coming here. Part of it is going to be preserve areas, but part of it is going to be choosing certain kinds of development, because certain kinds of development eat this up for lunch more than others. And so now it's back to David.
Thanks, John. So we'll jump to from the natural background to the people here, and first thing you want to know is, where does everybody live and where do they work? And so this is the population in 2015 from HGAC. So what you see is 0 to 100 people per square mile live in most of the county. This is rural land or natural areas. And then as you get a little bit deeper, you know, you get like the center of Hempstead is the most populous place, but it's isolated. So there are pockets of people around. You go to 2040, you see massive growth down here. Look at that. That's right at Katy, obviously, and nobody's surprised about that, I assume. But also up here. When you go to look at the jobs are clustered in these places that are your towns and cities. What is that right in between Katy and Brookshire? I don't know, but anyway, there's oh yeah, just some igloo or something, or it probably is igloo. Yeah. So your economy is here in these places, and that's actually a good thing that it's as tight as it is and not just scattered all over the place. And in 2040, it looks like this. Massive growth in jobs right again around Katy, which if you guys were dealing with Katy, you would have nightmares, I suppose, that are worse than you're going to have. But one of the things you notice, if you look, for instance, at Brookshire, in all that time, almost nothing happens. I mean, this little place right here gets green again. I don't know why, and then we see some jobs developing down here. Hempstead, no change at all. Nothing happens in Hempstead. Well, you know, that can't be if you want to grow an economy. You've got to figure out how to get more jobs, or else everybody's driving to Houston all the time, which means down here is a nightmare, as this is already a nightmare. So you want to try to figure out a way, some people at least, can live and work in Waller. So I'll stop there and ask Chuck Wimple to come up and talk a little bit about what HJC knows in terms of demographics. And then we'll jump, what comes next? Oh yeah, okay, so then we'll change the topic again.
Okay. David's given me one slide. I'll try not to screw it up. It was handed to me this morning. Thank you for being here tonight. A couple things on the demographics. Touching quickly though before this slide on something that David said about the jobs in Waller County. It's interesting, if you look at a lot of the Bureau of Labor Statistics information and census data for Waller County, about 85% of the people that are employable in Waller County leave Waller County for work every day. And you kind of have people coming into the county that don't live in the county to go to work at the jobs that are here. And I think something to kind of keep in mind going forward is certainly you may not be able to have everyone staying in Waller County, working in Waller County, but our rural counties and outlying counties are a little challenged in that regard. And whatever you can do to try and have more high quality jobs. You have a lot of good jobs already, especially compared to a lot of the other areas outside of Harris County and our more rural areas. You have a lot of really good jobs. If you can keep focused on quality jobs that people who live here can work and make a decent living at, then that's going to go a long way in improving the quality of life in your county. So with regards to this slide on the county profile, there is a website called ourregion.com, and it has 2 R's in the middle, so it's OURREGION.com. And if you go to that, there'll be a link for county profiles. And one of the things that we did as part of that Our Region work is we developed profiles for each of the counties in our 13 county region. There's a ton of information there. A lot of it is already very familiar to those of you that might work in economic development or community development. There's a lot of really good information on the demographics of the county that's there. The household income and educational attainment are below the regional levels. As you look into the detailed information on that, you've got a lot of folks with high school diploma, a higher percentage of folks with high school diplomas in other parts of the region. But when you get into the other degrees, then you tend to lag the rest of the region in that regard. More new housing than the region as a whole. You've had a lot of new housing coming in since 1990. That's going to bring you some challenges as well. One interesting thing on housing is that your percentage of mobile homes are about 5 times what we see in the rest of the region. So a lot of the housing that seems to be coming in, nothing against mobile homes and manufactured housing at all. I grew up in manufactured housing. A lot of my family in Montana live in manufactured housing. It could be very good, but also things that might increase property values a bit more, and the tax base could be something to look at as an area for growth. And then a lot of driving up and down the road, about 75% more than the rest of the region. A lot of that probably has to do with what David showed with the places where folks are living, where the jobs are, and then folks leaving the county and the area to work elsewhere and coming in. And with that, turn it over to David.
So I'm going to jump sort of back. This idea that Houston was designed around the car, I hear that all the time, and it's not true. This is how Houston developed, and I want to talk about Houston because it's like kind of a lesson for the whole region of how this all came about. You know, once people stopped walking and riding horses, or to add to that, they started taking transit. This was the first streetcars that were pulled around on muddy roads, and the way cities come about, you look at old pictures of Houston, it's got sidewalks, but it's got dirt in the streets because there wasn't any need for anything else. And then they came to these, so you see lots of pictures of these things going around in the mud. This one now has wheels for rail, but there's no rail. There must have been some somewhere. Maybe there is rail there. But the point was, this, I'm sorry you can't see all that white stuff in the background, a little bit you can see, but this is Houston's streetcar system, 1927. That's a massive, we'll never have anything like that again. Massive streetcar system. And it was started out over here in the Heights, where a developer and the electric company put it in because there was no way to develop that land, because there was no way for people to get to it. It was too far to walk from the city, from where all the jobs were. And so they built the first streetcar line up there. Well, that was a huge success, so they started building more. So all of these things like Bel Air and Spring Branch and East End, and all of these things were made possible by streetcars. And those streetcars, the neighborhoods, when you got off the streetcar, of course, you were on foot. And so you had to be able to get to the store or wherever it is in your home by walking. So they were compact little neighborhoods. And if you go up into the Heights right now, or in the Montrose or lots of those places, you can see still how that worked. They're walkable places where people walk to the store. I live in the Montrose area, right at a block from Mandel Street, which is where the streetcar was, and it's an amazing urban lesson to see how that neighborhood was developed for different kinds of people and different kinds of lifestyles, and just right because of the streetcar. Those neighborhoods, those places all still exist, even though the streetcar's gone. So they are places where people walk a lot, and a lot of bikes. People ride bikes a lot. And then, you know, back in the 40s, right after the war, we did what I call Houston 2.0 and said, okay, let's just do cars and let's have everybody drive out way out into the counties and so forth, and we'll have houses out there. So we're talking about 2 kinds of development here. Traditional development, which is for thousands of years, everywhere on the planet, mixed-use neighborhoods where there was more than one thing going, it wasn't just a set of houses. And the amenities were close together so you could walk to them, where mobility would include walking, biking, cars, and transit as cities got bigger. And then the new thing back in the 50s was what we called suburban, or sprawl is what we call it today, and where all the uses are separate, so the mall's over here, and so if I'll show you what that looks like. The amenities are spread out, and you have to have a car to do it, to go anywhere or do anything. So this, in this world we work in, this is a pretty famous map. So this is a traditional neighborhood. There's a collector road here. So this is a traditional neighborhood design. This is what we call sprawl. And in the sprawl, there's the same things are here. There's a shop and a shop and a school and so forth. You have the same number of houses, the same number of apartments, and the same whatever there is, jobs and so on. But they're arranged differently. So you see this curlicue pattern called cul-de-sacs is the pattern that's always used in sprawl. And the collector road, the name of that, it comes from the idea that everybody in here has to use that road to go outside the thing. There's no other way to travel except to get on the collector road. So think 1960, and you know that's all you need to know. You just because there's no other roads, it's always mobbed. And if you live over here, and there's some interesting maps about people, you know, a boy living in one place wants to go visit his friend just on the other side, but it's a 4-mile drive to get there because of the way the roads are all laid out. Over here, there's this grid that everything's always connected. There are lots of intersections and so forth. So when you want to leave this region to go somewhere else, you don't really need this road. You can take these roads. Or you can take this road. There's lots of choices. There's more roads. So I live in the downtown, near downtown, and whenever I come upon a problem on a major street, then I just turn left or right or whatever works, because I can go around it. You can't do that on 1960. So if you can sort of see, this is downtown Houston, and you can see this very tight grid, 250-foot blocks in here. Some of the best, what they call bones in America in downtown Houston. But as you go out over the years and you get into Spring Branch and so forth, you start to see these blocks get longer and longer, and they become almost not walkable, walking around the blocks half a mile or something like that. And when you get into this place over here, Uptown Galleria, which is about the same size as downtown, there are probably 25 times as many intersections here as here. So the grid is an important feature. And it's not just an important feature in downtowns. You'll see that every one of our towns and cities that were built before 1950 or so have a grid. And that's what sprawl looks like. So these roads are the whole game. Those are the blood vessels. Something goes wrong there, these people don't go anywhere. So they aren't really that different in terms. Yes.
Go back that slide, because something you just said is very important. Something you just said is very important when you look at that type of road network. We've had recent incidents with the drought that we all went through just a couple years ago, 3 years ago, increase in wildfire in the area, and actually some of the developments, it was very difficult, to get some of the emergency vehicles in to those areas where they needed to go, and then to evacuate people out also is a challenge. So certainly as we look for providing emergency services, very, very critical to have some sort of connection. Even if you do the more sinuous roads, still having more than one way back out is very, very critical.
And I experienced that when what storm was that? Ike? When we all took off. Rita, okay. And then my wife and I, we got on West Park, went about maybe a quarter of a mile for an hour. And as soon as we could, got off of West Park and kind of went through streets and then went through country roads all the way to Dallas. And it took us 5 hours instead of 4. And most of that extra hour was spent back there on West Park. So you can do that still. And because it's because of the grid, you can always turn left and right. You can always keep going. So yeah, good, thank you. So this is my neighbor, that's my street in Montrose, and one of the features of it is they're on it right now, but this is because these are Google Street Views. They seem to always try to take pictures when nobody's out. But these have porches, and people are outside all the time, and people all walk around and talk to their neighbors and have little gardens, and it's a real, it's very interesting, but it's very urban. You gotta like people. Whereas this is
I just
yeah.
might point out that because the lots here are, and I think an important detail, these are 50 by 100 square feet lots that in most of the rest of the places around Houston are probably illegal. So that lot size, that 5,000 square foot lot is actually, I don't know, I would wager that Hempstead has a minimum lot size that's bigger than 5,000 square feet. Right?
50 by 150.
Little,
50 by 150.
yeah, that's, cities and towns don't have.
First colony was 50 by 100.
Yeah. And I would not imagine these lots are much bigger than that. This is Cinco Ranch, but the difference here, you see, nobody's ever going to walk on that sidewalk, and everything's shut off, from the world, and that road is just what we call a traffic sewer. And then a traditional neighborhood that has a center to it. This is the Heights, happens to be. It's the corner of 19th Street and Ashland, near where there was a transit station. Looks like this, and look at all the cars and trucks out front. It's always busy, it's always making money, and it's small businesses in America. That's what we do in America, is small businesses. And so this is an economic machine for that little area there. Interesting, and I'm going to just turn around, so we'll go back this way. This is the same corner, but across the street, and starting around 1970, when the city said, oh no, we don't like this stuff up near the sidewalk. We want everything to be pushed back so we can have cars in the front. So that's what happens right next to, so there it is. There's that street, busy, 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 and there's that parking lot, which is making no money for anybody, including the city. I'm sorry I put this up here. I'll send it to you if you want. So, but the point we will say is that there are effects of sprawl on people, and they aren't good ones. From obesity, I mean, people live longer in the city than they do in suburbs. The people are more obese, and I shouldn't talk, but are more obese in the suburbs than they are in the city on average. Social capital, millions of things, and then there's the issues always, of course, of how much pollution is coming from the cars that are going 40 miles or so. It's stuck in traffic and just sitting there a lot of the time. So there's lots of problems that for the whole society, but particularly for the people who actually live in it. So, John, here's one right here.
Yeah, okay. So again, back to this issue of quality of life and quality of place and how those two things are connected. A lot of times we get confused about nature and the place of nature and the nature of place, for that matter, right? So I don't know if you all recognize this place here. Anybody recognize this street? This is actually not too far from you. A place that's ensconced in the woods. It's the Woodlands. I don't know if it's Woodland Parkway, but it's somewhere there. Now, a salient feature about this, and I heard one of the developers of the Woodlands actually talk about this as one of the major selling points of the Woodlands. He said what you see in this sign up here. You never ever see neighbors, right? So here's a nice street. There's actually development all back in here. There's gas stations, there's houses, there's all kinds of stuff. So he said, and this is a real sign. This is not Photoshop, by the way. This is real stuff. This is in Clear Lake, where my office actually is. This was a sign announcing a subdivision called Whispering Lakes. Just whisper to yourself, but there's no talking to your neighbors, right? So I think I raise this as a question. It's not just about eating up the land. That's a big deal for me, right? Because I'm the steward of the watersheds. It's about the kind of communities that we build, right? You guys live in a small town. You know what small town America is all about. It's about cohesion, right? It's about knowing your neighbors, right? It's not about your neighbors as strangers. This is about neighbors as strangers. I don't want to see my neighbors. Okay? What kind of social structure does that build? What kind of social cohesion does that build? Does that build a strong community for the future? I would argue that there might be a few little problems with that kind of a model. So again, here we are. So the problem with an area like this, we're chewing up the forest, we're chewing up the good stuff, and what are we getting in return? So one of the things I always like to say, or kind of a mantra of mine, is we should honor what we take. And take we must. We must take from nature. But if we're going to take from these, I would essentially almost call them sacred places, certainly special places, then we ought to honor what we take by building something for the ages, by building a community that's strengthened, not a community that doesn't have the kind of strength it needs. So this is a little bit closer together stuff here. So I mentioned when I got up to a minute ago here, I really want to stress that lot size is a big difference. I'm really going to stress that. We don't have to go to, multi-story 40 units to the acre. Just a small difference in lot size makes all the difference in terms of what we call walkability. Now, when we say walkability, we're not just saying there's a sidewalk there, right? You saw on David, he showed that one graphic with the sort of the big fence and walled off from the street. There was a nice sidewalk. You could walk it, no question about it. Walkability means there's something to walk to. And it also means that you like to walk there, right? You have some incentives to walk. So a place like this actually does have some incentives as you're walking. Now, how many of you would actually want to live in a neighborhood this dense? Does anybody here would want to live there? Nobody wants to live there, right? But you want other people to live there, right? So that you can, because you want to live out on your 5 acres, right? And you want to pack all, that's right, okay. All right, but what if I said that around the corner from this, you had this? Now how many of you would say, okay, maybe I'll live there? Anybody takers here? Okay, well, we're not getting a whole lot, But I did get a whole lot more than there were, okay? So a key point here to remember is that this idea of walkability and stuff being close together, there's thresholds, right? So if you want this, okay, you can't have that with this. It doesn't come with it. It's a package deal. Okay? So if you want to be far apart from your neighbors, you can't have the corner store. You can't have stuff going on. If you want this stuff around the corner, then you've got to at least have this, if not even a little denser. Now you all are saying, well, this isn't like Hempstead, right? This never happened in Hempstead. I think it did happen in Hempstead. I am pretty sure, we should research this out, but that when this place was laid out and platted out, that you had maybe even 3,000 square foot lots. Because people didn't have cars. They couldn't have 10,000 foot lots because it makes it too far to walk somewhere. So just that little difference of going from 10,000 foot lots to 4,000, 5,000 foot lots makes a humongous difference. Okay? So when you have a minimum lot size designation that's something like 7,000, 8,000 square feet, then that is a recipe for sprawl. Now, if that's what you want, that's fine. This is what we're talking about here, is trying to make these kinds of choices obvious to you so that when you make them with your eyes wide open. Okay? So if you want sprawl, then have big lots. Okay? Absolutely. So people actually want this, believe it or not, right? This is not something weird, right? You're saying, oh, that's not possible. Nobody in Hempstead. Okay, does anybody recognize this place? This is not some commie liberals, in New York. Anybody this is not far from you. It's actually by the Woodlands Mall. It actually is the Woodlands. The Woodlands is getting the message. They know that not everybody wants to live in the never see neighbors. They know that a lot of young people, especially the millennials, you've heard about the millennial generation, they want to be where there's people. They want to see people. They want to hang out, right? And if you want your see, my age, my kids are millennials, right? I'm worried about this. I got grandkids now. And if my kids decide to move away, I am in big trouble because I got 4 little grandkids. That is the #1 thing for me. And so my kids that are millennials, if they decide this place sucks, they're going somewhere else, my heart is broken. So builders get that. They're building this stuff because people want it. Okay, this is not some weird thing. This is small town America, right? I grew up in a little place in Idaho. I got here as soon as I could, as I was telling our friends that invited me here. I did come. Okay, but I grew up in a little town, Idaho, 5,000 people lived there. There was a downtown. I walked there. I walked to school. How many of you walked to school? How many of your kids walked to school? See, even here in Hempstead, your kids are not walking to school because you made choices that the car was the #1 design element, okay? When I was a little kid, this is what I lived in, this kind of stuff. I walked to school. I can remember walking to school. A carpentry shop was always on my way. I was always fascinated. Those guys had lathes running in there. They're doing cool stuff. I'd be looking and they'd, hey, come on in, Johnny. They knew who I was. They brought me in, okay? There was community there. There was structure, okay? That's what people want, and this is what people are building. So if you want your place to be a vibrant place, okay, and that your grandkids stay here, and that other people come here, then you need to at least think about this, okay? So the Woodlands is thinking about it. And not only the Woodlands, and by the way, they're not just building houses, they're actually building brownstones like this. This is something that you associate with Brooklyn, right? Now, I know that you don't want to live there, right? But your grandkids want to live there. So if you want your grandkids, you better build some of this stuff right here, okay? But this is happening all over Houston. Where else are there town centers like this? Have any of you noticed these kinds of things going up anywhere? Sugarland has a great town center. Even Pearland. Did you know that Pearland had a town center? I'm not sure anybody knows it in Pearland, but they've actually built it out there at, what is that, 518 and 288. It's kind of hidden. It's like it's like a mall that's surrounded by cars, but they've built it in such a way that they can expand that and it can actually be a real town center. So this is real stuff. This is not weird stuff we're talking about. Now we're probably just all out of time here, I'm sure. Speed it up. Okay. So just a real quick, there was a competition a few years ago about something called low impact development. Have you all heard about low impact development? Okay, that's supposed to be, you know, God's gift to the world, going to fix everything. So this competition was about taking a section of land out on the Katy Prairie and developing it out into such a way that the impact would be minimal. But you had to follow a sprawl pattern. It all had to be, you know, 10,000 feet lots, 7, 8, 10,000 feet lots. And then you could put little stuff like swells and those kind of things. So I was part of a group that said, you know what, let's develop this a little bit differently. Let's take this section of land and let's just take this section that they had for schools over here and let's build it like people used to build it 100 years ago. And we were able to take all the same number of units, 1,400 units, and put them on a quarter of the space. Now you're saying, well,